Hey guys, Jay here. So today we're taking a look at the best value Shanling CD transport. Yep, a lot of you guys have been asking for it. This is the Shanling CT90 transport for about $1,000. I know this is going to be something that's useful for a lot of the audiophiles out there that prefer to spin some CDs, especially for those of you that prefer to use your external high-end DAC instead of a DAC built into a CD player. Remember, this is a CD transport, not a CD player. So without further ado, you guys know how this goes. Let's talk about the build quality and the features and the things I liked about it and disliked about it. So in terms of the things that I liked about the build quality and the features of this unit, I really appreciate the fact that it has a lot of similarities with the $4,000 CD player that I swear by. And it's my main CD player, the SCD 3.3. If you guys watch my video, you guys know all about it. But yeah, the CT90 here, the overall form factor, display screen, the wooden puck, and the plethora of digital outputs to connect to your external DAC. These are all the things that I liked on the $4,000 Shanling CD player that is present here on the CT90. And that brings me to the second thing that I liked about this unit's build quality and feature, and it's that, well, this is a CD transport. It's a pure CD transport and not a CD player, which means that you have to use an external DAC with it. It's not a choice, you have to use an external DAC with it. And I see this as a plus, actually, as something that I like about this unit, because at this price point, most CD players are going to have a mediocre DAC inside, if anything. And if you do get a really good DAC in there that's worthwhile using, it's going to be pretty pricey, like my main CD player, the SCD 3.3. And the third thing that I liked about this unit is that, well, despite the price point being pretty affordable for a really high-end CD transport, you get quite a bit of features that's really reserved in the high-end kind of category. And that includes the ability to use an external clock on this. Now, I personally haven't, but the option is there, which I found to be quite interesting because that's not an option that you usually get with a $1,000 CD transport, I find. And talking about stuff that you usually don't get on a $1,000 CD transport, this unit also still has that upsampling engine, the one that I loved very, very much on the Shanling ET3. We still get that oversampling all the way up to DSD 512. And since this is one of the very few units that have an I2S capable of delivering that oversampled DSD 512 file or sampling rate to your external DAC, as long as your external DAC is capable of decoding that, then you can feed your DAC with this high resolution upsampled file. And I know some of you guys are going to be worried about the compatibility with the I2S because it has different pinouts depending on the brand, because there's no pinout standard for I2S connection. And some brands even prefer to gatekeep, and it's kind of sad, but it's true, prefer to gatekeep and use their own pinout. You know, they don't tell you what kind of pinout they're using so that they can keep that in the family so that you as a customer end up buying their CD transport with their DAC. Which is unfortunate, but thankfully the Shanling's I2S output here is FPGA controlled to automatically detect the pinout of the external DAC and is practically compatible with every DAC out there, which is awesome. And this is not just for Shanling, this is actually becoming the new norm. So there are definitely brands out there like the LAIV brand as well that is trying to make it more compatible rather than gatekeeping. So moving on to the things that I didn't like about this unit's build quality and features. Well, first of all, I like the fact that the I2S connection is capable of delivering the upsampling rate all the way up to DSD 512 and the 768 kHz for PCM, which is the highest resolution the upsampling engine will go, which is plenty high, by the way. But all those high sampling rates are only compatible when you use the I2S. If you use coax or AES, you're limited to DSD 64 and 192 kHz with the upsampling engine, and the USB is not compatible with the upsampling engine at all. So basically what I'm trying to say here as something I didn't like about this unit is that you must have an external DAC with an I2S input, or you're not taking full advantage of that upsampling engine inside the CT90. Also, the little pet peeve of mine of having the USB placement on the front of the unit for external hard drives is still very much existent on this unit, And I'm just not a fan of that because it ruins the look. But as I've seen in my comment section in my previous video with the SCD 3.3, a lot of people were okay with that and thought that was actually convenient. So that's just my personal dislike. But yeah, that front USB takes up to 2 terabytes of stored music that you can play back internally. Now the next dislike is going to be pretty niche as well. If you're like me and you own a lot of SACDs and you want to play them natively, then you can't. So while you gain the upsampling engine inside the CT90 that's not on the SCD 3.3, you cannot play SACDs on the CT90. Native playback of SACD is limited to the SCD 3.3 and the Onyx SACD player if you want a SACD transport. Now it's very clear to me that the CT90 is clearly the new value king. As a CD transport, it's far better in almost every way possible than the ET3, which by the way is very similar to this unit in terms of functionality and is a great player. And although I wasn't a huge fan of it, it did have a streaming function of basic AirPlay and DLNA kind of streaming function. And I really wasn't a fan of it because it kind of dropped in and out and it was just not my favorite. Well, they got rid of that. So I kind of see that as a plus for my personal kind of thing, but I do see that as a negative dislike for someone that wants that flexibility. But this unit does have Bluetooth 5.0, so there's that. You lose some, you gain some. Now with the CT90, to be very clear, I don't have any problems with the build quality of this unit. In the time I had it, it's built like a tank, or at least it looks like it's built like a tank. And personally, I think Shanling has come a long way in terms of reliability. And just looking at this unit, honestly, for $1,000, I'm seeing build quality drastically improve in this segment, and Shanling is no exception. It's really built really well, and I would have not expected to see something like this at $1,000 price point just a few years back. But I did see a lot of people in the comment section worried about the Shanling's reliability long term. So that's where the sponsor of today's video, Safe and Sound, comes in. Not just because they're the sponsor of today's video and yes, does sell the CT90, but because they are a big dealer and they are able to offer double the warranty, total of 2 years on labor and parts with that one extended year warranty. So if you want to be safe, pun intended, and get that extended warranty just for that peace of mind, then I highly recommend getting it from Safe and Sound. Also, they're throwing in for the first 50 purchases, they are throwing in a copy of this excellent quality MQA CD made by AQCD in Japan, because the CT90 also does play MQA CDs as well. Now, with that out of the way, now let's talk about the sound quality and the things I liked about it and disliked about it. Now, because this is a CD transport, largely and truthfully, the sound you're gonna hear is gonna largely depend on the external DAC you choose. But before we talk about any external DAC, I wanna talk about the oversampling and the effects of the oversampling, generally speaking, that has on the sound. Now, overall, I found that it was pretty consistent that when I used the oversampling engine inside the CT90, that the soundstage got wider and deeper. And it's not so much that I'm hearing more detail, it's more so that things are more sparkly, more spotlit, more nuanced and floaty in that soundstage with a better focus in imagery. So that's the improvements I saw pretty consistently across the board when I used my DAC with the CT90. However, it's not all positives either. Now I still stand by what I said on the Shanling ET3 review where I said this. And of course, I personally tried with and without the Shanling's upsampling mode here, and I personally found that I would really not listen to this CD transport without the upsampling. Not because without the upsampling it sounds bad, it's actually quite good, but when I do upsample, it's just that much better. And that largely stands true here. I wouldn't use the CT90 without that oversampling either. But the dislike that I found is that it does tend to make the sound more thinner and more leaner than I would personally like. So if I use a amplifier or preamplifier that also leans towards the colder, the leaner, and more detailed side, then it gets a little bit too much. So if you're using oversampling, it's important, I find, that you have the right preamplifier and amplifier that is described to be a little bit more textured, more full-bodied, and even warm sounding. And so when you use the right components with it, what ends up happening is that you still retain the effects of the oversampling in that sound stage being wider and deeper, and the details being more spotlit and the imagery being more focused and tighter. But now the sound overall is less lean and more full-bodied because of your right preamplifier and amplifier. So personally, what I've been doing is adding something like the Galleon Navy preamplifier or even the P75 to kind of plump up that sound and make the sound more warmer, richer, and more full-bodied. And personally, this has been working wonderful for me. Now, in terms of the DACs that I use with this, I use a lot of different DACs with this, but I really prefer to use something like the LAIV UDAC or the LAIV Harmony DAC because the overall sound of the LAIV gear tends to be more warmer and inviting. It's a perfect match with the CT90 that has a little bit more of a clinical and analytical sound. Now, the analytical and the clinical nature of the CT90 isn't so strong that it overtakes everything, especially if you use the right external DAC like the LAIV or even the DENAFRIPS and have it with the right preamplifier and other components. It only further enhances and adds to that musicality and just adds a little bit of clarity and transparency to the sound without coming across analytical or clinical in any way. But why I say that the CT90 has that clinical and analytical nature is that if you add a external DAC or a preamplifier or other components that leans too much towards that analytical and clinical side, it only adds further to that analytical and clinicalness, and it just becomes like a surgical board basically. So personally with the CT90, I really prefer to use warmer, more inviting DACs and components. So the LAIV is perfect for that. Even probably a better match than DENAFRIPS DACs. But with DENAFRIPS, I really enjoyed it with the Pontus 15th, as you guys know, and really any of the Pontus generation, whether it's the original Pontus or the Pontus 2, any of the Pontus, because the Pontus tends to be the warmest of the lineup in the DENAFRIPS line, in my opinion, it works the best with the CT90. I will say if you have like a higher end lineup of the DENAFRIPS DACs, like the Terminator and stuff like that, it may lean too much towards that leaner, more analytical side of things. But if you do happen to have a DAC like that with the CT90, it's not the end of the world. Like I said, having the right preamplifier and amplifier to plump up that sound and smooth things out a little bit can do absolute wonders in terms of musicality. Of course, unless you want that analytical and clinical sound, then you can get that with the CT90, no problem with really any of the SMSL topping DACs. But that's pretty much it for me in terms of my experience with the CT90. I absolutely love the unit for $1,000. I think it's impeccable. And if you haven't watched my ET3 review, then go ahead and watch that because this video is more of a sequel to that video, if that makes sense, because ET3 is what started my amazement with the Shanling players in general, because that was a really good modern CD transport. Again, especially for those audiophiles that wanted to use their own external DAC with modern connectivity. And that's pretty much it from me, but if you have any questions, comment down below and I'll try to answer every single one. All I ask is that you click that like button on this video and subscribe for more videos just like this. And I'll see you guys on my next one. Until next time.